Welcome back to the Saints Squad Show. I'm your host, Dylan Sanders of Saints Wire, and we have some beef with the Falcons fans.
I'm Raj Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast, and I think that one of the most important players that I'm most excited to see back during training camp plays Lance Moore's position.
This is Lance Moore, and where's John?
It's the Saints Squad, sponsored by Gametime. Everything New Orleans Saints, every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from down in the Big Easy, the way only Locked On Podcast Network can. Get ready and squad up. It's the Saints Squad Show, starting now.
Howdy, United Nation, and welcome back to the Saints Squad Show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making us your first listen every Monday and Thursday. We have a unique group of experts here ready to bring you a fun and informative show on everything New Orleans Saints. Today, we're going to be diving into stuff like Danny Stutsman season preview. Oh my goodness, it's that time. How do the Saints stack up with the rest of the NFC South? And then we're going to go over our biggest training camp questions at both wide receiver and cornerback. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. We have to address it. John's not here, and I have some distressing news. On the way to the studio, he recorded this at the studio. On his way to the studio, he was ransacked by a group of 4 Atlanta Falcons fans.
Oh,
kidnapped.
no.
We are in active negotiations to get him back from them, but you know how they can be.
Yeah, we
but
could get pretty far down the road in the first half.
Yeah, they could. Yeah, we'll be sure to make a late comeback. But until then, it's us 3. And let's start off with something one of us knows a lot about, and that's wide receiver. We're going to go over our biggest training camp question marks at wide receiver. And let's start off with that expert. Ross, how are you doing?
That's rude. I love it. Do you actually want me to start?
Yeah, sure.
Or do
why
you
not?
want Lance to start? Because I feel like Lance should
we're all
start.
gonna talk. It's a 3-man show. We're all gonna talk plenty.
We deserve your expert opinion, Ross.
I love it. All right. So my biggest question when it comes to wide receiver, and look, we'll take health out of the equation immediately for these, right? Like we know health is the most important thing. We know that health is the most important thing for every position across, training camp and everything like that. And so if I'm leaving health out of it, I think the biggest thing is who is the focus in this offense and who are really those secondary pieces. I think that there are some situations in which offenses come through and really, I guess the other question is how much does that change? So I guess what I mean to say is like, who are your core wide receivers? And when they're on the field, how much can you really move them around? How versatile can they be? One of the things that I loved about watching the Saints during Lance Moore's days is that you really never know who was going to pop off on any game. Like people always talked about Sean Payton being like one of the worst coaches for fantasy football because based on who they were going up against defensive wise, then the matchups and things like that were really what played to the game. And so I'm interested to see sort of how you begin to start to take advantage of not necessarily that in training camp, but work the versatility of these players to where some are flankers, some are X, some can play in the slot. You move them all around and all these other things. So I'm curious about what the impact is going to be from all these players. And in particular, Chris Olave, who I think is one of the most important players at this position, or the most important player at this position, one of the most important players for the team at all in 2025.
Yeah, I like that. Lance, what are your overarching question marks?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the jury is still out, right? Like you don't know. I mean, just kind of like what Ross said, like, what is it going to look like?
Right.
Like from the most basic standpoint in the NFL, I'm just going basic wide receiver 101 here. When teams line up, you usually have 2 starting wide receivers, right? Which is your Z receiver, which is the strong side receiver that's usually lined up to the strength of the formation. The strength of the formation is usually wherever the tight end lines up, right? And usually when you start out with a formation, it is a right formation. So the Z receiver lines up to the strength. In years past for this team, it's been Chris Olave. He's been the starting Z receiver. Then you've got your starting X receiver, which is the guy who lines up out wide on the backside of the formation. That's your starting X receiver. And the last couple of years, that has been Rashid Shaheed. Now, I don't know what that's going to look like. Just because a guy's on the right doesn't necessarily make him the Z. Just because the guy is on the left doesn't necessarily make him an X. And to Ross's point, one thing that made us so good is not just the fact that you never knew who was going to get the ball or whose day it was going to be, but you never knew who was going to line up where.
Right.
Positional versatility is something that allows offenses, specifically to the wide receiver, position, but having wide receivers that can be multiple guys that can line up to the right, to the left, in the slot, in the backfield, in the 3 position, which is in a trips formation. The closest receiver to the line of scrimmage is the number 3 receiver. That could be your Y receiver. That could be your F. Teams have different names for the receiver. But I think that having guys line up in multiple positions, not tying their hands as to what they can or cannot do in your offense, will allow for those guys to be really good. I would venture to guess that Chris Olave is the younger first round pick wide receiver in that room, that he will be the focal point as far as the wide receiver position goes. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to lead the team in catches or yards. Right. But that does mean that he's going to get a lot of the game planning when it goes into, effect, like come probably week 2 of the preseason when they start game planning for teams. He's going to be a guy that's going to get a lot of opportunity. That doesn't mean the other guys won't get opportunity as well. That doesn't mean defenses don't know what we know, right? And say, okay, well, Chris Olave is the guy that they're trying to get the ball to. Let's play our defense in such a way that doesn't allow them to do that, right? So if Olave is covered or somehow, some way is not open or falls down, we have other guys on the field that can make plays as well. And, I can speak from personal experience. Like a lot of the game plans when I was playing for the Saints had a lot of Marcus Colston written on it. But at the same time, it had a lot of Jimmy Graham written on it, a lot of Darren Sproles written on it. You kind of have to get in where you fit in a really good offense that has a lot of mouths to feed. I think this could be one of those. But one of my questions about this position group is like, what does their kind of rotation look like, right? Like, we think that Olave and Shaheed are the starters. They should be. They've earned that right. What is it going to look like after them? Like, that is going to be what's going to be like really, really important, because you need 4 to 5 guys that are regulars out there to not just make plays, but to spell each other, to offer the defenses a different look. There was times when, like, from an insider's perspective, I felt like in my day that we got a little, I don't even know what the right word is, but like, I could tell, obviously I'm in the game plan meetings, but I could tell when Devery and Meacham went in the game and Marcus and I came out of the game, it was one of 2 things. It was a shot play or it was a run play. Like, and that was kind of like, like you could kind of guess, okay, these guys are coming in. It's 1 or 2 of those things. And then, when Marcus and I went in, it was a little tougher to tell what it was, but generally it wasn't a shot play if it was just the 2 of us in the game. We had
did you feel like it not predictable, but like it telegraphed a little bit?
Telegraph for sure. And like, I used to joke all the time, in the receiver meeting room or even in the offensive meeting room, I'd be like, yep, we're the specialist Saints. Like, you guys want that deep ball, you're going to take Marcus and I out of the game. You're going to put Devery and Meach in the game. And not like that I was mad about it or whatever. We had our roles.
No.
And I feel like we played our roles really well. But if somebody spent enough time watching I mean, I would assume teams spent a lot of time, but they didn't spend
Right.
enough time because they couldn't
Because
stop
they
it.
also couldn't stop it.
Correct. So, coaches have their thing, right? These are my guys that I want on these specific plays. These are my guys I want on these specific plays. We're running the ball here. We need the bigger body, thicker guys in there that can hold up in the running game. Not to say that, guys can't do those other things, because I feel like the best receivers are your most versatile receivers, guys that can kind of do everything. And I don't feel like we've gotten a chance to see totally what Rashid and Chris Olave can do. Mason Tipton, clearly. Brandon Cooks obviously has cut his teeth for a long time in this league. We know what he's about. We know what he can do. And honestly, I feel like he could really be a chameleon in this offense. If they need a starting Z, he can jump in and play Z. If they need a starting X, he can jump in and play X. He can jump inside and play some slot. I think the other two guys can play slot as well. I just don't know that they've gotten a really good opportunity to consistently show what they can do on the inside. But I'm curious just to see what that rotation looks like. What guys that are kind of on the back end of that receiver group step up and could potentially earn themselves a role in training camp. And I'm really curious to see the kind of run pass balance, to see if that affects who's on the field and when they're on the field, right? Like if we're going to lean on the running game, it might look a little bit different than what we're expecting, right? As far as who's on the field, they might want somebody like Bub Means out there,
Bub,
a little bit more.
Jones, Dante Pettis, like the kind of bigger guys.
They might want those bigger guys on the field. So Chris and Rashid and even Brandon Cooks aren't out there having to, hit their head up against the wall a whole lot of times throughout a game. So, I think the jury's still out clearly, but I'm interested to see what it looks like.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's just really the biggest question that I had, and we've kind of touched on it. It's just who else? Because we know like Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and we know Brandon Cooks, but like last year, even whenever they were healthy, it didn't look like the receiver room had enough juice in it outside of the first 2 weeks. And whenever Olave and Rashid Shaheed went down, it really, really looked bad. So now they really need other people to step up and be those bottom guys, those rotation guys. Everyone loves Bub Means. We've shouted out Donovan Peoples-Jones, Mason Tipton, like as people who could break out. Cedric Wilson Jr. It just has to be somebody stepping in and taking it by the horns. And I wanted to ask you all, because every year at training camp, there are these receivers and guys that like break out and everybody loves them, but nothing really happens. How can you tell the difference between a training camp mirage versus a training camp like breakout? Is there a way to tell?
Well, I can speak to that because that was that was me early on in my career, like the 06 and really I think 07 was even more so. I mean, nobody really knew who I was going into that 2006 training camp. The first one at Millsaps College in Jackson, Mississippi, they called us the Junction Boys. It was 100+ degrees. Like it's one of those stories that people are like, all right, old man, like whatever. But it was like
you had to walk uphill both ways to practice.
We did. Like we were on this campus. Nobody knew where the heck we were. Like, we had to be at this place that's all the way on the other side. Of course, the dorm rooms were on the other side of campus from where the football facility was. There was no indoor, right? So it was like super duper hot. We had 2-a-days every single day. We were in full pads at least one practice every single day. And then the second practice or the first practice, we'd still be in uppers, right? So we just have shoulder pads and helmets, but we'd still have shorts on. So it was like a brutal training camp. But for a younger guy like me that really didn't know any better, like I had only had one other training camp in my career, and that was with the Browns in 05. It didn't really bother me that much. Like I was used to like the hard nose, like let's just grind this thing out, like training camp. So I just came in with like, okay, like I'm just going to ball out every single day. And I ended up doing that. And then 07 was even better. I think I led the preseason in yards or something like that in the 2007 season. I have to go back and look, but I was up there. But it's you want to see guys earn their spots on the team, right? And like that was kind of one of the, the things that I did, obviously, in those years. But that doesn't necessarily earn you playing time, right? Like, so it's sure you want guys to step up and go and take a spot, right? And you don't want to just hand deliver, okay, this is going to be our fourth receiver, this is going to be our fifth receiver. Like, you want guys to like take the bull by the horns and like hopefully make you right. But if they're not making you right, they make you make a decision that's a tough decision because of how well that they played. But even if they are, making your roster, like they could still just be your fifth or your sixth receiver, and that doesn't guarantee them any kind of playing time. Like that's going to have to happen down the line, right? A guy could be really, really good in the preseason, but he's still not as good as your top 3 or 4 guys, And so I think that, like last year, like it was Mason Tipton in the training camp practices. Like everybody's talking about him, and people are texting me, this dude reminds me of you so much. Like he's this and this and this, and like he's making plays every single day. And he was in
the Key and Peele sketch.
Well, not yet. We're working on that for him. But he just, like, and when I went out to Irvine to meet with them, and he had already hurt his hamstring. So that was like a big deal. Like, dang, like this guy was doing so well, but now we didn't really get a chance to see much of him because he was hurt, and then he was out for so long. So there's a lot of like factors that are involved when it comes to like, okay, this guy is like amazing. He's awesome in training camp. And look, usually the guys that are awesome in training camp are really good players. Like you don't just show up.
It's not a fluke.
It's not a fluke. You don't just show up in that setting and you're great and because everybody else stinks, right? Like this is an NFL training camp, right? This is these are the best football players in the world. And in order to have a great training camp, you have to be a pretty good player. So I don't know that it's like a mirage as much as it's like there are so many other factors that are involved when it comes to a guy having a really good training camp, and then that might maybe not like turning into having a great season, right? There's a lot of things that have to go in a player's, especially when it's like a player that's kind of like not necessarily unheard of, but like under the radar, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Like a starter that has a great training camp. Okay, they're generally they're due for a great season, but the lower roster level players that have great training camps are just verifying that they've got the potential to be one of your good players, and then they have to get that opportunity to make those same types of plays when it gets to the regular season, but it doesn't always work out like that.
Yeah. Well, coming up next, we're going to jump over to the other side of the ball and talk about the players that these guys are going to be going one-on-one against at cornerback and what the big questions on that side of the ball are going to be. Wait, what's this? I just got a text from John saying that the only way the Falcons fans are going to let him go is if I get them 4 tickets to the Home Run Derby tonight in Atlanta. But that's so last minute. It's going to cost me so much more money. If only I had some. Wait, today's sponsor Gametime can help me out, because Gametime actually helps make getting concert and sporting event tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last minute deals. So take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets or saving your friend from being trapped from fans of a rival fan base with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
That was good.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah, thank you. Bravo. So let's go over to the defensive side of the ball. Start at cornerback, our biggest training camp question marks. And I'm going to start us off with something I'm really excited to see, because as the more I look into this cornerback room and this Brandon Staley defense, I'm so excited for the versatility of these players. And I'm just really excited to see where these guys end up playing, like who's on the inside, who's on the outside, who's playing a little bit in the box. Like, where are these guys lining up in this Brandon Staley defense? Who do they see or envision using these roles? Because we have guys like Quincy Riley. We've talked how fun he could be on the inside. Alontae Taylor is obviously a game changer on the inside, but all of these guys can also make plays on the outside. And it's just such a new group, a new defensive style. It's just going to be fun to see what Brandon Staley thinks he can get out of a younger and unproven group. Like, the most proven player in the room is Isaac Yiadom.
Right.
So that says a lot about what Brandon Staley is working with. And so I do think he's going to have to get creative. So I'm excited to see what they do with these guys, and especially Jonas Sanker. He's just such a fun tool, because he could really, in my eyes, end up anywhere on the defense, because that's what he did in college. He played everywhere. So that's really what I'm most excited for. Ross, what's your?
I think that makes sense.
Question marks?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is kind of similar to what you're talking about, but specifically, who is the guy on the outside opposite Kool-Aid McKinstry when they're in nickel? That's my big question, right? Because I believe you're going to see Alontae in the slot. You're going to see Kool-Aid McKinstry on the outside, but who's that guy opposite Kool-Aid McKinstry? Is it Isaac Yiadom? Is it Quincy Riley? Is it somebody else? Is it someone that's unsigned at the moment? Is it somebody that's not even on the roster at the moment, right? Like, who is that player going to be? I think that's going to be the other thing, because these guys are going to get targeted throughout the 2025 season. Quarterbacks are going to go after him. You've got young players. You've got players in new positions. You've got a new defense, all these other things. And of course, you're a corner. You're going to get targeted in the NFL. So all of them are very well prepared for that. But my biggest question mark is just who's going to be that player opposite Kool-Aid McKinstry in sort of the boundary part of the defense when they go to that nickel set, because they're going to be there a lot, right? Like, that's something that both Kellen Moore and Brandon Staley have talked about. Like, shifting to an odd front, but you live and die in the NFL playing nickel. Teams ran 11 personnel on average last year, 61.1% of the time. And so you're going to see a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. And even if you're not in a 3 wide receiver set as the opposing offense, sometimes some offenses, those tight ends are so athletic that you'd rather be a nickel, right? Like, sometimes they do that against Atlanta with Kyle Pitts, guys like Jonnu Smith. They tend to force teams sometimes into nickel coverage instead of base sets with that tight end on the field. And so, or even with 2 tight ends on the field, because of the sort of athleticism of one of those guys. And so I'm just curious to see who's going to be that guy that ends up winning that spot opposite Kool-Aid McKinstry. Yiadom has the veteran track, but man, Quincy Riley's ball hawking ability, I think, is something that's really, really, it's a highly desirable trait for any NFL defense.
Yeah, I like that. Lance, what are you looking forward to answering at cornerback?
Well, I think it's twofold for me, because I obviously have the same concerns as you guys. So I'll go in a different direction. Like, obviously we're wondering who's going to line up where, right? Who's going to be on the field? Right. Who's going to step up? But one, are they going to get some help from the guys up front? Is our defensive line, or should I say our front 7, are those guys able to get some sort of a pass rush, right? To give them a better chance. I'm not going to say make it easier, because it's never easy out there. Trust me, I played against those guys all the time. To give them a better chance at being successful on the outside. We know that quarterbacks playing under duress makes their job more difficult, which in turn generally makes the defensive backs' jobs shorter and easier. With the young group that we have, with the unproven group that we have, are they going to have the assistance that I think that they're going to need? Not because they're not good players, but because it makes their job easier. Are they going to get that assistance from the pressure that the defensive front could get? And hopefully that pressure isn't one-off, right? Like, hopefully it's consistent pressure that they're able to get in the passing game, so that their ability to cover is maximized. And then the second part of that, I know Paulson Adebo is gone, but can our guys finish plays in a clean manner? Right. Can we be a group that plays clean football in the secondary. It's not just the corners, clearly, but I think for as good as Paulson Adebo was at making plays on the ball, getting the interceptions, and being in position, I feel like there was just times that he panicked and made a silly tug or pull on a guy that I think sometimes was unnecessary. He also started to get a reputation as a guy that was doing those things. So sometimes he would be in perfect position and there might have been a little tiny bit of contact, but hey, it's the Debo over there again. Like, let's throw a flag on him. Those are like really, really demoralizing plays. And not just for your team, but for those guys specifically. And I know everybody always says like short-term memory when you play DB, like that's something that's easier said than done. It's not easy in a game with 70,000 fans in the dome. Everybody's, relying on you. Everybody's up and geeked up, and there's a 45-yard pass that's thrown down the field. You think you made a great play, and all of a sudden you look down and you see that flag, and you're like, oh no! And then the whole building is booing like that.
Right.
That can't be easy.
That's a whole other level, right? Like
it's one thing to get cooked in practice, right?
Right.
Like, you get cooked. The team is there, the scouts, the coaches, the front office, like everybody's there. That has to suck as well. But then you do it not just in the dome or any other building or stadium, but the millions of people watching potentially all over the world. That type of play can really, really get to you. And look, the great ones obviously don't worry about it and they don't let it get to them. But there's a human component that goes along with this as well. And younger guys that haven't been in the fire that much, it could potentially affect them. I'm hoping that we are able to play clean football and not give up too many of those flagged first downs, whether it be illegal contact, defensive holding, or pass interference. Because those obviously keep possessions going and keep our offense off the field in the same vein.
They averaged 23 yards per defensive pass interference last year.
It's a big deal.
Chunks, man. That's chunks.
For sure.
For
sure. And look, you could it's the NFL, right? The rules are set up in such a way that the offense has the advantage.
Sure.
Which is why defensive backs cannot touch receivers more than 5 yards down the field. And there's a little bit of a gray area, right? If the DB's standing right in the way of where you're running, like he has a right to his space, but you also have a right to yours. So it's like, it's kind of tough on the officials to be able to judge, okay, is this illegal contact or is this receiver just running into him? Is this guy just standing here to prevent the receiver from running his route? Like there's a little bit of a nuance to it when it comes to the officiating. But like there's
no nuance. It's either right or wrong, and they're always wrong. Whatever it gets to say,
for sure. Well, whatever the call is that we want, if they call it the opposite, they're wrong for sure. And I've been a part of that. Man, you guys are calling all the defensive pass interferences like when our defense is on the field, but when I'm running a route and this guy's grabbing and holding me, you never throw the flag. Like I've been there for sure. But it's definitely a tough job to do, both for the officials and for the defensive backs. But playing clean football, to me, like, are we going to be able to play a more clean brand of football out there in the secondary? And I don't want their aggression to be brought in. I don't want that at all. I want them to play aggressively. I want them to be active as far as, making plays on the ball and getting their nose in the dirt. Like that's a part of playing defense. Like, you want to be mean and nasty, but you've got to be smart about the technique part of it. And that's the part for me that kind of has me a little, my interest peaked a little bit more with such a young group.
Yeah. I
the other thing. Oh, go ahead, Dylan.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to change the subject, though, is the thing.
No, you're good.
Okay. All right. The other thing that I'm interested in, it's still on corners, but the other thing that I am interested in and that Lance helped kind of jog my memory of, is how well they adjust to the new defensive system. And, look, zone match coverage is not easy. And it goes well when it works well, but it can give up some big and explosive plays. It requires a lot of communication. It requires a lot of if-then rules, if that's the version of it that Brandon Staley is using. I'm not entirely sure, but if that's the version that they're using, it's either if-then or they're doing like rip Liz, right-left type of rules. I'm not sure which one it is, but whichever way they go about it, like it's a little bit more complex than just like glue to your man and be on the hip. Like it's a different game entirely, or typical traditional zone coverage where you have responsibility for an area, you know what I mean? And so like, it's a little bit different in terms of what it is they have to be able to do. It tries to emphasize the best parts of zone and man, but sometimes you end up with the worst parts of both, depending upon, if somebody miscommunicates or somebody doesn't, stick to somebody when they need to, when they pass through their zone, or, when they do need to pass off and all these other things. Who's got the outside break? Who's got the inside break? Who's got the vertical route? Yada, yada, yada. Like there's a lot of those types of things sometimes that end up creating some issues. Not to say that they won't be there, but you're going to give up explosive plays. It's the NFL. So how do you try to minimize that as best as you can in this new system, and how quickly can you learn the new system? I think that's the other thing I'm really intrigued by throughout training camp.
Well, and to that point, I think that making sure that the guys are seeing the same thing. I mean, that's I guess a more simplified way of saying what you're saying. I mean, it's similar to an offense and the in a passing play, right? The quarterback gets the ball, he's looking at the coverage, making sure that he sees the same coverage that the receiver sees, because a lot of times whatever the receiver's route is changes based on what the defense is, right? So your responsibility in this Brandon Staley defense could change based on what will change based on what the offense is doing. And the worst thing that can happen is 10 guys being on the same page, one guy not seeing what everybody else is seeing and dropping potentially a player or an area that becomes occupied by an open receiver, running back, tight end, whoever. And that's what creates explosive plays potentially is just one guy. It's not that like, oh, this offense is so much better than this defense, or this was the wrong play call on this specific, situation. It's usually one guy that gets beat, or one guy that drops a coverage, one guy that busts his assignment, and that turns into a big play for the defense. So it's making sure that these guys, while they're young, are understanding what it is that they're looking at in front of them, and then they're able to respond accordingly. That's going to be a big deal for this young group.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, this young group is going to be facing the NFC South teams twice a year, and we're going to see how they and the rest of the team stack up with those opponents coming up next. Yeah, the pin code for the tickets is 2823. Oh, sorry. We are back with the second half of the show. We're going to do moving off of training camp. Let's talk about the NFC South and how the Saints stack up against the competition. And Ross, what do you think about the state of the NFC South as a whole and how the Saints, stack up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still safe to say that the NFC South is one of the more winnable divisions in the NFL, right? One of the divisions that could see a different team win it this year than who won it last year. I think the AFC South is in that category as well. And so that's generally what I think of the NFC South. But I also think that the NFC South is getting better. Like, I don't think that we're looking at this, leaderless division anymore, right? Tampa has won the division each of the last few years. They're the favorites to win it again, and rightfully so. They've kept all their pieces. They've continued to improve, all these other things. Now they lost Liam Cohen. We'll see what that kind of impact that has over on their offense. Do they take a step back with the new coordinator? Are they even better with the new coordinator? Like, what happens there? The Falcons, I think, have done things that could improve their defense, but what they're doing is that they're relying on a lot of unproven pieces to get it done, right? A lot of rookies on the defensive side, good investments, right? James Pierce Jr., Jalen Walker, all that, like, that's all there. They had what I would call one of the NFL draft analyst favorite drafts, right? Because they drafted all the hot names from everyone's analysis and everything like that. But you're still relying on a lot of unproven young guys to get that defense improved. You're still relying on an unproven young quarterback to potentially get your offense going. And they haven't parted ways with Kirk Cousins yet. So they're in the danger of the two quarterbacks, no quarterback kind of thing. The Saints are kind of in a similar situation there. They're relying on young pieces. They have two quarterbacks. They're not sure which one it's going to be, and they're going to be relying on an otherwise kind of young quarterback, but they're also in more of a rebuild situation. They wouldn't call it that, but I will. They're more in a rebuild situation than the Falcons are, who are kind of in a trying to build a competitor, conversation at that point. And then Carolina, I think, is going to be better than people think that Carolina is going to be. Like, they've got a lot of good pieces. Bryce Young looks strong at the end, all that. So I do think that the NFC South isn't the laughing stock of the NFL anymore. I think that firmly belongs to the AFC South at this point. But I do think that it is still a division that doesn't have, while it has a favorite, doesn't have a clear-cut leader of a team there, which I think keeps everybody and all four of those teams in that division still alive in that situation, even though it feels like there is certainly a hierarchy in terms of what the division does look like.
Yeah, I'll bounce off of that, because my big thing is that I do think that this is actually something that hasn't been talked about a bunch in the development, or like the situation the Saints have to deal with Tyler Shuck and Spencer Rattler this year, is that the NFC South defenses were not good last year.
Right.
And I like you said with the Falcons, like, they improved their draft. With the draft, those are young guys. You don't really know, like Jalen Walker, is he going to produce this year? Like James Pierce, even Carolina added some pieces on the line, but nothing that really changes it. Tampa Bay got worse in the secondary, in my opinion. Like,
agreed.
So I just think that this is a unit, a division that I think is open for Tyler Shuck to not have to face like elite defenses in this first year a bunch. All those three teams were finished in the bottom 10 in passer rating allowed last year. And I think that is about as good of a situation as you can ask for 6 of the games of a rookie season for a quarterback for these defenses that didn't really improve that much. So while I do think the Saints, might not be my pick to win it right now, I think that this is still like one of the better divisions for them to be in, while getting younger guys to learn how to play football.
Yeah,
at the NFL level.
All four defenses finished in the bottom half of the league last year in EPA, like defensive EPA as well, like the efficiency rating that takes into account things like down and distance and game situation and all those other pieces, like, and score and time. All of them were in the bottom half, with the highest being Tampa at 18 and everything. So to your point, like, that's a big part of what the kind of story of this division is.
Yeah. Lance, how do you feel about these?
Well, I agree with you that I'm thankful that we're not in the AFC or NFC North, like either of those divisions.
Right.
I think it's two things that I am looking at when it comes to how we stack up in this division. First and foremost, you talked about how poor the defenses were. Is our defense going to be any better this year?
Right.
Like, we were a part of that group of 4 defenses.
All 4 of them.
who were not very good. Right.
Yeah.
Is our defense going to be better at, first and foremost, stopping the run? Secondarily, getting pressure on the quarterback, getting turnovers. Like, is our defense going to do the job that it needs to do in order for our team to have success? And I think the second part of that is the quarterback position. What are we getting out of the quarterback position? I think the offensive line has a lot to do with that. Clearly, they need to be healthy, but having a rookie or a semi-rookie starting at quarterback,
young quarterback,
but a super young quarterback. This isn't like a third-year guy, fourth-year guy that hasn't played yet. Like, these are rookie quarterbacks. Like, I know Spencer Rattler played in a few games last year, but like,
with a practice squad
going into the season as a starter, like, a lot of the success of this team is going to be predicated on what that quarterback, whichever one it is, or both, whatever they're able to do as far as, getting this offense going, getting it moving, like, and being able to score points. That's going to be, where I'm looking at. And then as far as like how we stack up, I'm still like, I'm one of the biggest Saints fans that's out there. I want this team to be good. I want this organization to thrive, but I still like internally, I want this to be part of the rebuild still. Like, so as much as I would love for them to go and win the division, what really is that going to get you? Because I don't think that we have a team today that's winning a Super Bowl. And unless you're winning a Super Bowl, like a division championship, a wild card playoff bid, to me is a moral victory. And I don't think we're in the business of moral victories here. Sure, it sounds good. It'd be great to put another banner inside the bubble in the Metairie for division champs. But I just like, this team needs more and more time. And I don't want there to be a fool's gold situation where we end up having, a decent year, maybe a game away from the wild card, and everybody thinks everything is great. Like, and then again, we're drafting in the teens instead of, the top 10 and hopefully the early top 10. It's harder to get really, really good impact players the later it gets in that first round, and then in later rounds as well. Like, the later you draft, generally, the players aren't as good. That's
why Mickey doesn't like to trade back.
It's an imperfect science. Clearly, we know, because there are guys that don't get drafted that end up being great, and there are guys who are drafted high who end up not working out. I don't like to call guys bust. I feel like that's disrespectful. I don't know. I think there's a lot of question marks, but I just think that, middle to bottom of this division should be where we are. But based on, what this division looks like, I would not be surprised if we're middle to the top. I mean, that's just how it kind of goes. And you're always only an injury away. Like, if something happens to somebody major on another team, like, heaven forbid, clearly, but things could change rather quickly.
Game of attrition, right? Like, that's what the NFL is all about.
Yep.
I definitely think there is a universe where you finish above the Panthers, Falcons, and Bucks, and you're still not considered one of the best teams in the NFL. Like, we've seen it in the past. Like, you win the division, and you're just like, okay, yeah, cool, you get a playoff spot. What are you gonna do against the Bills? In the Super Bowl, or earlier in the NFC. I don't know why I said the Bills. Go Bills.
I think if I had to pick, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it brought me back to what Lance said about the bust. I saw something where, like, the pick for the most likely Saints bust this year was Kelvin Banks Jr., and I just think that is like the most unfair thing I've ever read. It's like a rookie left tackle starting at 21, whatever.
Kelvin Banks Jr. is like one of the least talked about first round picks for the New Orleans Saints in like their recent history. And it shocks me that he becomes the bust potential player. I mean, I get it. He's a top 10 pick. So it's, it'll get you to the read and all the other stuff. I get that. But like, that seems like a strange stray for Kelvin Banks Jr. to catch. Kelvin Banks at home? Like, what? He's just minding his own business.
What? I'm on a team with Chase Young.
He's like, no one's writing about me. Nobody's talking about me, all this other stuff. But here I am. I'm bust candidate. Oh, okay. Dang. Sure.
Well, I know he wasn't a first round pick, but Teron Armstead to me was kind of in a similar like boat. Like, young guy out there playing left tackle. Nobody's talking about him. He's in and out of the lineup for a couple of years. Then all of a sudden he's like the highest paid tackle in the game. You know what I mean? Like, that would be a great trajectory for Kelvin Banks Jr.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah. And I do think, tying it back into our conversation, one of the reasons I liked the Kelvin Banks pick so much more, even after the end of the first round, was the fact that the Falcons did draft Jalen Walker and James Pierce. Carolina did beef up their defensive line. So the Saints are going to need to improve their offensive line this year if they do want to compete in the NFC South, because these teams are clearly realizing where the money is made in the NFL and how you get further in the playoffs, and that's with a better pass rush. And so having Kelvin Banks Jr. and Talise Fuanga on the other side of him for the foreseeable future is very, very fun in a division that is really investing into the pass rush.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it all worked out well for New Orleans in that case, right? Drafting Kelvin Banks Jr. at number 9. And then watching the way that the dominoes fell for each one of these other for the defensive lines on each of these other teams, I'm sure that they were like, okay, like we picked the right guy early on. So kudos for that. And then I think the other thing with that too is and this doesn't have to start a new conversation, but it's another one of these big things over on the offensive line is how does Trevor Penning work at his new position, right? Like that could change everything for this team because you don't want interior pressure on on any quarterback. You certainly don't want it on a young quarterback, right? And so, how does he perform in those situations too?
Yeah. Well, we've talked a little bit about Kelvin Banks, but I think a different rookie is going to be on our minds coming up next. I'll enjoy not seeing Ronald Acuna Jr. Okay, so we are closing this out today. We're going to continue on with our season preview series, and we're going to go with our guy, Danny Stutsman. And I think there's only one person that can start us off here. Lance, give us your thoughts on Danny Stutsman and what he can do as a rookie.
Energy.
Yeah.
Energy.
Yeah.
Woo.
Energy. And that doesn't stop. Like once he gets off the field, I feel like he's going to be one of those guys on the sideline that continues to have the big energy and get the crowd involved. And we don't know what his role is going to be. Like he's probably not going to start week 1, based on us having Fred Warner and Demario Davis as our, starting inside linebackers. I do think he's going to have a role on special teams for sure. I think there will be packages potentially that we see him on the field defensively. But I think when as Demario is getting later into his career, not trying to retire him, but he's been the high energy, emotional leader of the defense for several years now. At some point, there's going to have to kind of be a changing of the guard. And what better way to do that than drafting a guy that has similar traits when it comes to personality and the energy, obviously. I'm looking forward to seeing this guy on the field. Like he was all over the place at Oklahoma on the defense and just made plays everywhere. And the energy part of it is contagious. We've had conversations about that. I think it was last week that we were talking about what that energy does for those around you. And I think that it's positive energy for sure. There are guys that hang their heads and stuff like that. Like he's a guy that always kind of stays positive when he's out there, and he's a playmaker. Like I want to see him out there on the field in some capacity. And we know that at some point somebody may go down, and we've got another guy that can kind of slide in there and make plays. And if you watch his tape from college, like he definitely looks like a guy that can slide in and make plays in the NFL. And I'm excited to see what he can do.
Yeah. Ross, what about you?
Well, first of all, we'll have to get my friend John Williams from the Locked On Sooners podcast on the show at some point to have him come and discuss just how vital Danny Stutsman was to the Oklahoma defense. Like he talks about it all the time and everything. But I think I've learned from John just how impactful Danny Stutsman is, both on and off the field. Like this is a guy that also, by the way, off the field gave up part of his NIL with JBL to partially pay some of the tuition of some of the walk-on guys. Like every walk-on guy on his team, he ended up giving money to through his NIL and stuff like that. Like, so that's also the type of guy, like human that we're talking about in this situation. And then you put that in this New Orleans culture, like he's going to fit right in. He's going to blend. Like it's going to be a really good fit for him. And then that translates, I think, on the field, because now you want to go out there and you want to keep showing out and showing up and all this other stuff and everything. And I think that his leadership, his energy, all that's there. The fact that he's a solid tackler amongst a team that, dealt with a lot of missed tackles last year and costly missed tackles. Like, you're going to miss tackles in the NFL, but when you miss tackles and then it turns into, an explosive play, that missed tackle meant more than the missed tackle that gained 2 extra yards. You know what I mean? Just contextually, everything. And so when you get a guy in there that can be a more solid tackler, that can be more reliable, all that, then I think that that's something that's going to be of great value to this defense. I'm with Lance on this. I don't think that you're going to see him on the field a ton week 1. In fact, I would say probably like a guy like Nephi Sewell might even be ahead of him, even as the 3rd linebacker. But I think that is something that changes over the course of Danny Stutsman's development. But I think he seems pretty pro ready. Like, he's got the NFL size at the position. He's uniquely in between like the traditional linebacker size versus like the modern day linebacker size. He's got the athleticism. He can cover, he can rush, he can tackle. He does well in, run fits and shooting gaps and things like that in the run game. Like, he just kind of checks all of the boxes in a way that's better than, and I know we've talked about this before, but that's better than the master of none, jack of all trades. You know what I mean? And so I think that that's the thing that kind of separates him from, he was the number one, or he was a top 3 off-ball linebacker in this class. And then so him falling to where he fell, where the Saints were able to draft him late, like, it's a pretty good situation for them. And so I think it was a worthwhile investment. I don't know what all we get out of him we get to see out of him for his rookie season, but I think that once he hits the field, whenever that might be, whether it's because of injury or otherwise, it's going to be really, really hard to keep him off of the field. So I think that it all starts when he starts. And once that happens, then I think you see the rest of the trajectory kind of follow after that.
Yeah. I want to take a look back at Pete Werner's rookie year. And of course, this isn't the same situation. He was a 2nd-round pick. I would say, Quan Alexander was not as much of a bona fide starter as Pete Werner is now, in terms of like being above him in the depth chart. But Pete Werner had 62 tackles, 4 tackles for a loss, and a quarterback hit as a rookie. He had allowed a 75% catch rate and then 134 yards in coverage. But I think that he had a bit of an opposite of what we would see from Pete Werner. He came on and played a lot in the first couple of weeks, and then his role dwindled as the season went on. So he ended up playing about 40% of the snaps. Would that be a huge win for Danny Stutsman, or is that, where would that land on the Stutsman scale?
If the 2 linebackers ahead of him, Demario Davis and Pete Werner, were healthy, I think 40% would be a huge win for Danny Stutsman, right? Like, that means that he has one opportunity in that case. But that's just my kind of guesstimation from that. Lance, what do you think, like, knowing what you know about what that would mean?
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. And I was just thinking about what Dylan was saying with the 75% catch rate. Like, a lot of times, the running backs or the tight ends are catching the ball before they're like, the check down plays. So
yeah, right. Closest
the
defender versus
it's different than the percentage for a defensive back, or specifically for a corner, right? If a corner is giving up 75% catch rate, then we're going to be in trouble, so that's not really something that I'm overly concerned with. But yeah, if somehow he's able to get 40% of the snaps defensively, that's huge. Especially if he's not starting like that. That would be a huge win for him. Or it could be problematic for us, that we're having to take starters out of the game because they can't do one or the other. I think that, the youth is on his side for sure. And the health of the other 2, or lack thereof, could be on his side as well.
Yeah. The other thing that happened with Pete a lot over the course of the first maybe 2 years, 3 years of his career is that, like, he often jumped out early in the league in terms of like solo tackles. and everything like that. But then the injury or some missed time or something like that would set in, and then he would fall back in that conversation. So it was a little bit of like a lack of consistency, a lack of availability kind of a thing. But he would consistently be at the top of the NFL in like solo tackles, maybe it was total tackles for the first 6 or 7 games of a year, and then kind of drop off after that. And so there's a momentum part of this conversation too, to where how does having Danny Stutsman behind, kind of waiting in the wings, how does that maybe force more development or force more consistency from a Pete Werner, right? Like there's that other effect, I think, that doesn't get talked about a lot, to where, yeah, the young guy's there and he's threatening for a spot, but also does that kind of push the other guy, the more experienced guy, to go out there and, try to ward him off a little bit, right? Like there's a value to creating competition one way or another.
Yeah. What would you like to see, I guess, Stutzman push Warner to do better or do more of this year?
I think one of the big things from the second level has always been for New Orleans has always been sort of where's the playmaking going to come from, I think, is one of the biggest things. And look, sometimes defenses don't get playmaking from their second level. It just depends on what they're asked to do, right? Like if you're asked to, the Saints in the run game, I was talking to some of the defensive players during mandatory minicamps, and the Saints players felt that their responsibility in the run game was eat up blockers on the defensive line and open up gaps for the linebackers to shoot. I don't know if that's unusual or just typical. I'm not sure, but that became sort of the idea. And so it put the linebackers, it put the run game very much in the hands of the linebackers. And so that means that there's probably not a lot of playmaking opportunity for guys in those types of situations and things like that. But can you get after the ball? Can you rake the ball? Can you do all these other things? Like, I think that's the other thing that you're looking at. But maybe playmaking is a big part of what you would like to see there. But I think the biggest thing for Pete Werner, really, honestly, is just consistency, right? Like where you start, where you finish, and just be there the entire season and have some level of consistency, as opposed to a little bit of the roller coaster that we've seen throughout his career.
Yeah, because we've seen flashes from him, right? Like,
Right.
I mean, you mentioned the being a leader in tackles and making those plays early on in the season, being a guy that's been able to make plays on the ball as far as forced fumbles.
Yep.
Like he has that ability. We saw it at Ohio State, and it seemed to kind of go with him early on in his career, but you can't make those plays if you can't stay on the field. And I feel like that's kind of been the big thing with him is just not being able to stay healthy consistently enough to become one of those really, really good players for our defense. Like if he's not able to stay healthy, then, the ceiling is kind of lowered for him. And then that potentially offers opportunity to a guy like Danny Stutsman. So I mean, I think that if Pete can't stay healthy, then we're going to be having the same conversation over again. Like, dang, he was so good early and then he got hurt again. Like, it's hopefully he's able to do that.
Yeah. Well, we saw him. It was kind of the thing. He was a very low, very high floor player coming out of college. Like you watch him and what he did well in college, he does well now, but he's never really gotten better. Now he's been in the league for a few years. Lance, I wanted to ask you, can you teach an old dog new tricks in the NFL? Like, is there a point where you're like, oh, this is the player that he is? Or is there still room for him to get much better at this point?
Well, I think all players, the ultimate goal is ongoing skill development, right? Like I think you can get better, but I don't know that Pete Werner is going to turn into Fred Warner. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just nice. I think that he is a good, solid player. I think he can improve. I think he can be a better player, right? Like that should always be the goal. Like you should never ever say, okay, I'm a finished product. This is what I am. But is he going to be afforded the opportunity to show those improvements? Is he going to stay healthy enough to show those improvements? Is he going to get better? Are we going to see that on tape this year? I don't know that. I don't know that you can a guy that's several years into the league. I don't know that you can totally reinvent the player. But I do think that players can improve as they get older into the league. Yeah. But there generally is going to be a peak and then at some point a plateau. I mean, because it happens to all of us. You just can't do it forever. That's the reality of playing sports and particularly playing football. But I do think he can get better, and hopefully he's able to show that he's improved over this offseason.
Yeah. Hopefully he's more of a Better Call Saul than a Stranger Things, starting out strong and getting better as it goes on. So I don't know. That's the first example I can think of, but I don't know. I still like Pete Werner as this haven't kind of turned into what God, Pete, please be better, which I feel like happens a lot on the show. I do want to say I do like Pete Werner, and I do think that he is going to be a contributor to winning football. I just think that the excitement around Stutsman will only push him to get better. And then if he doesn't, you have Stutsman there who looks like, again, that, higher floor player. Like, he is a skilled linebacker already, the size, the energy, the tackling ability. But then you have the shiny new toy where he's like, imagine how good he could be. Could he be
great
Fred
context,
Stutsman?
Dylan.
Could he be Fred Stutsman?
Danny Warner.
Danny Warner. Oh, man. Well, I hope that you learned some new tricks on this one. I don't know. I didn't have a good one this time. But thank you for listening to the Saint Squad Show. You can check out me, Ross, and Lance on our social for the latest. And I want you to text John and wish him that, or tweet at John and wish him a safe release from the Falcons fans. But until then, we'll be right back at this spot on Thursday, ready to talk more New Orleans Saints football. And until then, be sure to listen to Locked On Saints for your second listen of the day.